Hi everyone, in this video we're going to be taking a look at English language paper 1 and paper 2. We're going to be thinking about practicing the key skills needed to help you with both exam papers. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to recap something that's very important. It's not just important with English, but it's important just generally within society. We're going to think about the British values. So as you can see there are a number of different images that might help you to think about what the British values are. So if you'd like to pause the video here and look at each of them in more detail, please feel free to do so. Now what we're going to do next is we're going to jump ahead and we're going to look at the answers in the next part of the video. Class feedback. Check your answers against the ones below. So the first one we're going to focus on then is democracy. We also have individual liberty, the rule of law, and also mutual respect. So if you're not aware of what these are, it's a really good idea to get some notes down to make sure you know what they are, because these are things that are frequently asked in interviews as well. So first of all then, with democracy, this is the right for people to have a say in how the country is run, with their votes and choices guiding decisions making in the government. Next we have individual liberty. So this is the freedom to make personal choices about one's life, lifestyle and beliefs, provided they are within the boundaries of the law. Next we have the rule of law. So this is the understanding that laws are in place to protect society and that everyone, including the institutions, is subject to and accountable to these laws. And our final one, and arguably one of the most important ones in my mind, so for the tolerance for those with different faiths and beliefs and for those without faith, so treating others with dignity and consideration even if their choices, beliefs or backgrounds are different from one's own. So if you'd like to pause the video here and make some notes, please feel free to do so. We're now going to jump ahead to the next part of the video and think about how we can apply this to the rest of our learning. So by the end of this lesson, you'll be able to recall what is meant by the British values, understand connotations and how these are used in writing, and finally apply your understanding to a transactional writing task. And as you can see, we've already gone through the British values, so we can give that learning objective a tick already. So the first thing we're going to do then, we're going to think about our connotations. So we're going to look at the words below and attempt the challenges that follow. So the words we're going to focus on are bullying, fighting, violence, training, courage, red, and that's it. So the first thing we're going to think about in terms of our actual challenges is, can you first of all use the words to predict the focus of today's lesson. So all of these words will relate somehow to the actual task that we're going to be doing later on. Next, if you think about our super challenge, can you pick one word and consider as many connotations of that word as possible? And for our third task, our mega challenge, I want you to consider this statement. So some people believe that boxing or martial arts are violent and encourages a bullying culture. To what extent do you agree? Now if we think about our super challenge as well, it does ask you to come up with as many connotations based on the words that we've just looked at. If you're not too sure what we mean by connotations, it's really important that you're aware of this key term, so it might be an idea to make a note of it. So connotations, these are the associations you have around a specific word or phrase. So if you're not too sure what we mean by this, we can do the first one together. So if we were to take the word red for example, typical connotations would be things like blood, violence, warning, but you could also have some positive connotations as well, like love and passion. So it's important that you think for each of these keywords, what are the typical kind of words that you associate with each one, and what are their connotations. If you can also stretch yourself further, consider that stretch and challenge task with the mega challenge, and try and think about how you actually agree or disagree with the statement that's been made. That's feedback. So look at the statement and attempt the challenges that follow. So as we look at this statement then, you can see that many of the words that we just looked at in the previous task are also there within this statement. So I'm going to read through it in a moment, and what I'd like you to do is to consider the following challenges. So the first one, I want you to look at how the key words have been used, and then why are connotations of words important. Then for the super challenge, I'd like to try and stretch yourself a little bit more and identify any language techniques that have been used in the passage. Now if you're not too sure what we mean by language techniques at this stage, don't worry about it too much because we will be having some more feedback where we go through this as well. And for our final one, our mega challenge, do you agree with this statement? And if you can, if you're available to actually have this conversation with someone near you, try and justify your answer and have that conversation. So the text says then, I don't like boxing because I'm against violence. I admit it does take some courage to even step into a boxing gym. I'll never risk it. But for me, I just can't see any positives. Did you know that bullying in schools is at an all-time high? Boys are always quick to lose their temper and resort to fighting. They just see red and can't seem to be able to control themselves. With boys being so quick to jump to violence, why should we even allow our children to go through these kind of gyms? Why allow them to go through training that could harm, injure, or even cripple someone when they lose their temper? So if you'd like to pause the video at this point and go through it in your own time, please feel free to do so. We're now going to jump ahead to the next part of the lesson. Class feedback. Check your answers against the ones below. So on our left hand side then we have the same text that we've just looked through, and now we're going to just pick out some of our language techniques. So the first one I'm going to point out is a rhetorical question, and you can see it there in that line. Did you know that bullying in schools is at an all-time high? So if you're not sure what we mean by a rhetorical question is simply a question that doesn't require a verbal response. Next we have a metaphor in the line, they just see red. So by that we mean that we're using that connotation of red, which typically means violence or anger a lot of the times, and then just seeing red implies that they're being violent. Next we have imagery, by saying that boys jump to violence. We have another rhetorical question, in why should we even allow our children to go to these kind of gyms? And then we have a really interesting triplet here that could harm, injure, or even cripple someone when they lose their temper. As you can see there for the final one as well, with losing their temper, we have another rhetorical question. It's important to note that if you are producing a piece of writing like this yourself, then you want to make sure that you're using a range of language techniques and you're not using the same ones over and over again. So if we were to be critical of this response, one of the key things I'd focus on is the fact that they've used 3 rhetorical questions when it might be important to actually mix it up a bit and show that you know how to use a range of techniques. So if we look back at our learning objectives then, we can see that we've already recalled the British values and we've just gone through understanding connotations and how these are used in writing. Our final thing to do then would be to apply understanding to a transactional writing task. Look at the exam question and attempt the challenges that follow. So it says then, schools should ensure that all students take part in sports. It is good for their mental health and well-being, physical fitness and social skills. Write an article for a magazine in which you explain your point of view on this statement. So for this question, it's question 5 of paper 2, and you get 24 marks for content and organisation, and 16 marks for what we call technical accuracy. The total marks for this question is worth 40, so it's really important that you read it carefully, you take the time to plan the question, and then you know how to respond effectively to this one. So whenever you get a question like this, a really important thing to do is to break it down, and we're going to try and break it down by identifying the topic, so what specifically are we writing about, the audience, so who is going to read it, and the purpose. When we're thinking about the purpose, we need to think, are you writing to inform, persuade, or advise? It's important to note that we are being asked to write an article as well, so we need to think about our super challenge, which says what kind of organisational or presentational features would you use for this question. And then finally, hopefully you've heard of this before, again if not, don't worry about it because we will be going through it in a moment. Can you use the DeForest acronym and the previous part of the lesson to start planning your response? Look at the form of writing below and think about the challenges that follow. So when we're producing an article, which is what we've been asked to do based on that question, we need to make sure that as a minimum you've got the use of simple title and paragraphs. Now if you want to make sure that you're going to get the highest grade possible, you want to aim for the more detailed or developed indicators that you can use. So these include things like a clear and apt original title, a strapline, subheadings, an introductory paragraph, and effectively fluently sequenced paragraphs. Now sometimes people are not too sure what we mean by that final one, and essentially all it means is that it flows and it actually makes sense and it sounds like a normal article that you get in everyday life. So think about our challenge question at the top there. How confident would you feel if you had this form of writing for the exam compared to some of the others that could possibly come up? So now what we're going to think about is doing a bit of planning. So there's numerous ways that you could plan for your writing. It's important to note though that you won't get any additional marks for the plan, so you don't want to spend too much time doing it. So with that in mind, there are certain ways that people plan. So we have mind maps, we have a spider diagram, and we have bullet points, and also we have what I call checklist planning, which is what I'd advise you to do. Now if you use checklist planning, this is going to ensure that you use the techniques that are going to get you a good mark. It also makes sure that you're not going to spend too much time planning rather than actually writing your response. So if you are struggling to start, we're going to go through a plan on the next part of the slides, and it's going to help you to formulate your own ideas and hopefully your own response to the question. So these are the steps that we're going to go through in order to actually plan an effective response. So hopefully you have heard of DeForest techniques before. If not, don't worry about it. One important thing to note is that these do vary ever so slightly from teacher to teacher. So as you can see there, we have things like discourse markers and alliteration, and these are often swapped out by some teachers for things like direct address or anecdote and things like that. So it doesn't really matter which form of this acronym that you use, as long as you're actually including some language techniques in your response. So once we feel confident about our DeForest techniques, which you can see on the left hand side, we're then going to put together some draft sentences to start forming some ideas for our paragraphs. So one can be, I believe it can be hard starting a new sport, however. So if you think about that statement or the sentence, try and think about the kind of techniques that have been used in that line. So first of all, we have an opinion, because it says I believe, and we also have a discourse marker in the word however. Next we have, you're presented with challenges, obstacles and serious issues on a daily basis. So we've got a triplet there, and for the next one we have, who doesn't enjoy doing a sport or activity at school? Should be a child question. 90% of students are already exhausted from being at school, would be a statistic. And the final one is, who can blame young people for choosing devices over sport? And again, with this example, we've got two examples of rhetorical questions, so it's important to note that you need to mix them up and not use the same one over and over again. If you also look at the example, there are a few other techniques that are going on in some of those draft sentences, and you will find the more you get used to using these, you'll almost use them subconsciously without even realizing that you're doing so. Now if you're planning your response, you can use this basic kind of steps to make sure you know how to structure an article. So first of all, with your introduction, we have to realize that this is the most important part. You need to explain what the rest of your writing will focus on, but at the same time, without going into too much depth, and make sure that you capture your audience's attention. Secondly, we're going to think about the main body of our writing. So ideally, within a 40 mark response, we want an intro and a conclusion, and for the main body, you want 3 strong paragraphs with a clear, different focus in each one. Remember, you'll win more people over if you can present a balanced argument to the issue. And then finally, we'll have a conclusion. This is where you sum up your writing, and you're going to explain what will happen when they take on board what you've said, and think carefully about the outcome you want for your writing, and don't forget to sign off in an appropriate manner. Now if you are struggling to start as well, you will be able to download an actual grade 4 example response that will be available in the description below. It's important to consider our stretch and challenge task as well. So if you read the response, this is a grade 4 response, you can read through it and try and identify any features that you might think makes the writing effective. So if we look back at the learning objectives from the start of the lesson, we had recall the British values, understand connotations and how these are used in writing, and hopefully you were able to apply your understanding to think about that transactional writing task. So we've done all three of those now. If you're a little bit unsure about them, again, please give us a comment below, or you can go back over the video as well. Always happy to reach out and talk to anyone if they need any help and support within their course. Again, if you do need any additional support, then it's important to note that new videos will be uploaded every single week. Alternatively, you can contact our partner channel, Bookworm Teaching, for more lessons and guidance on all things related to English. If you've made it this far in the video, guys, I'd like to thank you and all the best with your work and revision in the future. Bye bye.